Gauteng police are warning that kidnapping cases are on the rise. Provincial Deputy Police Commissioner Fred Kekana says at least 15 people were arrested for alleged kidnappings this week alone. That's just last week. According to the provincial statistics, between October and December of last year, 52 more cases being reported, bringing the total number to 2,500. Dr Bandile Masuku, chairperson of the Gauteng Community Safety Committee, joins us now for more. Dr. Masuku, thank you so much for the time. It's actually funny. And I say funny tongue-in-cheekly, because my executive producer, has actually sent me a link a moment ago of an interview I did just last year, talking about the number of kidnappings increasing between January and March of last year by 16% already. So this is a year-long phenomenon that we're now seeing. So basically, we could attest to the whole year seeing a vast increase in kidnappings. Why is this happening so much now?
It has increased over time, and I think it has been a concern of the committee and the police, and I think that's the reason why we welcome the intervention of the formation or establishment of a unit that is going to focus on this crime. Type of crimes, and you'll actually recall that there are different ways or different types of kidnappings that we see. There are those that are associated with carjackings, which usually the victim will be escorted to the ATM for them to actually even open their bank apps to actually empty their accounts. And then there's one that is actually linked to business people, particularly in the area around Bedford View and also Lenasia and all the other places where big business owners actually stay. And this one is actually related to ransom. And this is what we see. And this is a phenomenon that we have observed over time. And I think it's timely that the police in Gauteng have actually established a unit that will actually focus on it.
But Dr. Masuku, why? Why is it happening so much now? What has changed, particularly over the last 5 years? I mean, statistics are, it was 2,605 kidnappings that we saw in the final three quarters or 3 months of the year 5 years ago. And now we're sitting at 4,775. What's changed?
With crime, we see that there are type of crimes that increase over time, particularly when the rewards are quite huge for the criminals, and they shift to it. You will also recall that at some point we did have a very big problem of cash in transit heist. So that's the nature of crime. And as soon as we are able to get on top of it, they will move to another type. And I think that's what we need to be wary of and be aware of and be cognizant that this is how criminal activity does actually do happen, and not only in Gauteng, but generally.
So are we saying that the reason for it, because I'm asking why, is possibly opportunistic?
Definitely, it's opportunistic, and the rewards mostly in other cases, they're quite huge, particularly in terms of actually ransom. But we know that in terms of the police, they almost all the time advise that ransom shouldn't be paid. And this is what we see. And some families feel that it's important that they pay the ransom so that they get their loved ones back.
Okay, so if we're saying that these crimes are opportunistic, Dr. Masuku, then what would the national anti-kidnapping team that you've been speaking about, the formation of this new team and the E2 project linking police with private security, what would that do then that couldn't be done by the police, especially when the crimes are opportunistic? So it's not like there's any methodical way to then get through this.
No, there is, in actual fact, because if you have to deal with actually syndicates, you have to further actually gather, more intelligence, and also make sure that the people that are targets are also pretty much vigilant. But importantly, syndicates require not a very short-term type of approach. They need a long-term, well-planned, so that we are able to execute and arrest all of them, at once. And I think this is something that we are applauding with the police, that establishment of the unit will make sure that there's significant amount of intelligence that will be gathered, there's significant amount of methods that will, observing, the modus operandi of these actual syndicates, and also the hotspots, because the hotspots are actually known.
Yeah.
It doesn't generally happen anywhere. It also happens in certain areas, and we need to increase our vigilance. With the I2, it's an important aspect to it, because securities are also part of a force multiplier, in terms of visibility and
Sure.
also response.
And I guess, and I don't know what your thought is on this, but Dr. Masuku, if anybody calls in reinforcements, if I go and I call in somebody to help me for any other task that I'm doing, it means that on my own, maybe I'm not giving it as much attention, it's not getting the full beans it should, and maybe I'm struggling a little bit with it. If you're going to call in a national anti-kidnapping team, an E2 project that links police with private security, it means that the police are struggling to cope with doing this. Is this to say that the police, in effect, are struggling and are unable and have almost been defeated by the number of kidnappings that are happening?
I wouldn't say that they are defeated, but I think, every help is actually, every assistance is actually, welcome. And we have always said that it's important that when we fight crime, it should be in a well-coordinated, integrated, and cooperative way, So all the law enforcement agencies or task force or whatever, should be well coordinated, and they should work together in a well-coordinated fashion. Because if we don't do that, I don't think there will be amount of police, in terms of a police ratio and the community, that will be enough. So we require, everybody to put hands on decks, including the community themselves.
There's the need to rebuild trust in South Africa's police. And one can say on a broad level, there's a lot to be said about that because of what you're also seeing in whether the ad hoc committee or the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. But communities often feel that even reporting these cases may not necessarily lead to meaningful action. How do we rebuild that public knowledge and trust so that victims actually go out and report this stuff, able to give testimony, bear witness to what has happened, and actually share it?
What we hear from Madlanga, it's a very important evidence that will require us to influence how we change how policing is done in the country. But importantly, in terms of what you are saying, in terms of trust, it's another angle of it, which is the justice system, where arrests, when they're effected, they should lead to actually sentencing or actually conviction. And if we don't see that, that's where also the trust actually diminishes more. But this Madlanga Commission comes at a timely space to make sure that we are able to reform and rework our police actually service and make sure that they build trust. And the last aspect of it is that the communities themselves, importantly, I'm a proponent of actually strengthening community policing, because that's where most of criminals and crime actually happens. And with more communities getting involved, we will be able to see much more crime actually getting detected even before it even happens.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We often talk about technology being a help case in some ways, and it's just simple things like e-panic buttons and how significant those could be. I mean, that was announced by the Premier Panyaza Lesufi as well. How could that be integrated into this to ensure that these kidnappings decline? Is there a plan to decrease these kidnappings, and to what number by when?
Yeah, I think the issue is not only about what the panic buttons that have been introduced. There are a number of them, and they are quite helpful in many instances when they are actually activated. But in a broader sense, you would understand that even social media, even the smartphones, the smart watches have actually been very much helpful, in doing tracking and tracing of actually criminals and victims. And we need to use technology broadly, not only focusing on one, the CCTV, panic buttons, even the tracking devices, which are things that we would want to encourage the community to continue to acquire, particularly those who actually can afford. And those who can afford, the state must be able to provide these panic buttons, the physical ones, which actually can be activated. One of the important tools, technology enhancement. It's an important way of how we can be able to deal with crime.
Have you been watching the show this morning?
Not, I only saw the last part of it.
Okay.
Just after 8.
Only because we've been noting in our poll this morning, and we've been asking our audience really around these kidnappings, whether they even trust the police to combat kidnappings. And there's your answer there. 83% are saying no. 12% say with sufficient support. How do we grow at least that middle one? Because 5% of people saying that they believe that there's trust in the police to combat kidnappings is a bleak number.
It is a bleak number, and it is concerning, but it's not something that we didn't expect, that we are working from the point of view of a trust deficit, and we need to work out more trust and build more confidence. And part of it, the establishment of this unit itself will help us more to be able to curb and deal with it. Like I've said to you, that syndicates, they are more likely to be captured with more intelligence work and operations. But general policing, just driving around and so on, and with police visibility, it might not actually help. It could contribute slightly, but ultimately, we need a more proper, organized, unit which will be able to gather intelligence and able to deal with it. Because most of these kidnappings, particularly the ones for ransom, are actually syndicates.
Let's just get a little bit more admin out the way with regards to this national anti-kidnapping team. Well, that will sit under the police, am I correct? Is that going to be capacitated with new staff, different staff, or just staff taken from other places within the SAPS and then into this team? And what does that do for general capacity of the police?
The one that we are talking about is the one that established by the province, Gauteng, and it will be a multidisciplinary, and they will be drawing on a number of units across the province in different aspects in terms of expertise that exist, and we want to see, how it will be able to pan out. But what we are happy with is that it will be a multidisciplinary, multi-expertise that are drawn up from other parts of the police service. And I think I could imagine that if we don't have some of the expertise within the province, national will be able to assist by bringing in from other provinces, which is something that we will encourage. Maybe in the due course, they will be able to share the information of this unit, but we welcome it. But maybe just to add that as a committee, we had actually agreed that we will engage the communities, that are targeted and the hotspots, just to also raise the awareness within those communities and to be aware, because some of them, they should be somehow mobilized to make sure that they are able to be aware of their situation and their surroundings.
Policing model, does that need a complete overhaul? Because these little reforms might not necessarily be working. We're adding a little bit here, adding a little bit there. But overall, it feels like we need a complete overhaul of how the system works, the strain that's put on consumers and communities, and the ability for it to actually be more targeted at these particular crimes. Yes, we talk about Gauteng, but the country over.
Yeah. And I think maybe the issue is that when we focus on Gauteng, we'll be able to deal with the crime in other parts of the country. But, the reform itself, we are hoping, I think all of us as citizens, as public representatives, we're hoping that what the Madlanga Commission recommendations will be able to do for us will be able to assist and enhance, reforms of the police service, more especially, the reformation of our community patrolling actually aspect, and also our intelligence actually gathering, because that's where I think we have been lacking in a big way.
Dr. Bandile Masuku, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it this morning. The chairperson of the Gauteng Community Safety Committee, speaking to us about the rise in kidnappings across the country, but certainly with that focus, of course, across Gauteng, as we made note of the poll question.